And now we're recording. All right. So, if you have tangent, then the first thing you find is cotangent. Tangent squared plus 1 equals secant squared. So 4/25 plus 1 equals secant squared. So 1 is 25/25 plus 4/25 is 29/25 equals secant squared. Then we take the square root of each side. What's the square root of 29/25? Square root of 29 over 5. Okay, I guess my eraser doesn't work, but oh well. So square root of 29 over 5. Are we going to be positive or negative? It's going to be negative. Why? Because we're in quadrant 2 and cosine and secant are negative there. So talking about cosine, we just flip over secant to find cosine. So it's 5 over the square root of 29 equals cosine. But I don't leave it in that form, so what do I have to do? Multiply top and bottom by square root of 29. So it is 5 square root of 29 over 29. And again, this is negative. Okay, so all our negatives are done. Now we just do the positive ones. Since cotangent's a fairly simple fraction, cotangent square root of x plus 1 equals cosecant square root of x. So negative 5/2 squared plus 1 equals cosecant squared. So 25/4 plus 1 is 4/4. So 29/4 equals cosecant squared. So cosecant equals what? Square root of 29 over 2. If we flip that over, the sine of x equals 2 over the square root of 29. So multiply down bottom by square root of 29. So it's 2 square root of 29 over 29. How about that? There we go. What's the cosine of negative x? Is it negative cosine of x or is it cosine of x? Cosine of x. So cosine of x minus cosine of x is 0. The sine of negative x is what? Negative sine of x. The cosine of negative x is cosine of x. The cosecant of negative x is negative cosecant of x. A negative times a negative is a positive. So we're going to end up as positive. Cosecant is 1 over sine of x. So what happens to that? Cancels. So I'm left with cosine of x. We FOIL. So when we FOIL this, we get 6 sine squared of x. Outers is minus 15 sine of x. Inners is plus 2 sine of x. Last time last is negative 5. So 6 sine squared of x minus 13 sine of x minus 5. When you have a quantity squared, you write it twice, and you FOIL. 4 cosine squared of x minus 14 cosine of x minus 14 cosine of x is minus 28 cosine of x plus 49. Okay. Now we have to factor. So multiply first and last terms, you get negative 6. What are factors that add up to negative 6 that have opposite signs? Well, negative 6 and a positive 1, right? Because they have to have opposite signs, and the bigger one is negative. So you write 2 cosine of x minus 6 and 2 cosine of x plus 1. Greatest common factor of this is 2. Greatest common factor of this is 1. So it's cosine of x minus 3 times 2 cosine of x plus 1. So if we FOIL this, we should get this. Cosine of x times 2 cosine of x is 2 cosine squared of x. Outers is cosine of x. Inners is negative 6 cosine of x. So negative 6 plus 1 is negative 5 minus 3. Here, difference of squares factoring. 4 sine squared of x minus 9 cosine of x is 2 sine of x. Inners and outers are plus minus 3 cosine of x, 3 cosine of x. Continuing factoring. When there is no first term coefficient, you just factor. Cosine of x, cosine of x. Signs are the same because it's positive. They're both negative. Okay, because two negatives times each other add to be a negative, multiply to be a positive. What are factors of 8 that add up to 6? What did you get, Will? Huh? Oh, I'm supposed to be paying attention?
Minus 4 and negative
2 and 4 add up to negative 6, multiply by 8. Okay, if your first term coefficient, you can multiply them, or if they're both first and last term are perfect squares, it's a perfect square trinomial. Square root of this, sine of the middle, square root of the last, quantity squared. 3 cosine of x minus 2 quantity squared. Okay, and now to the trigonometric identities. What should I do first on number 10? Change tangent to sine over cosine. What's cosecant become? 1 over sine. The two cosines cancel, a sine and one of these sines cancel, so I get sine of x plus sine of x equals 2 sine of x. So 2 sine of x equals 2 sine of x. Cosecant, I'll change into 1 over sine. All right, so when I have a complex fraction, I multiply by the denominator of the denominator. So I say sine of x, but I'm going to distribute through both of these. So I'm going to get sine of x over sine of x plus sine of x over sine of x over sine of x minus sine of x. This is an important step to show, because if you don't show that step, I'll take points off. Okay, because you got to show that, hey, I'm multiplying both of these by that. So 1 plus sine of x over 1 minus sine of x. In this one, cosecant goes to 1 over sine. So you have 1 over sine of x minus sine of x equals secant squared of x. So if you know nothing else to do, change anything that's not a cosine and cosine into something that's a sine and cosine. Now, we have a complex fraction, right? Because we have fractions inside of fractions. get rid of the fractions inside of fractions, multiply by the denominator of the denominator. So take this times sine of x, this times sine of x. Distribute. So you get sine of x over sine of x over sine of x over sine of x minus sine squared of x. Make sure you distribute, because some people yesterday weren't distributing. They were just taking this times this and calling it good. So you got to distribute. So 1 over 1 minus sine squared of x equals secant squared of x. 1 over cosine squared of x, because 1 minus sine squared is cosine squared. And 1 over cosine squared is secant squared. Mr. Bruns, that part of your paper looks pretty blank. Yeah. All right. On the last one, negative 1 over sine of x over cosine of x minus 1 over cosine of x equals 1 plus sine of x over cosine of x. Okay, what do we do to top and bottom here? Multiply by cosine of x. So negative cosine of x over cosine of x sine of x over cosine of x minus cosine of x over cosine of x equals 1 plus sine of x over cosine of x. Here the cosines cancel. They'll cancel to be 1 here. So we have negative cosine of x over sine of x minus 1. So I don't have any addition or subtraction in the numerator. I have subtraction in the denominator. I have addition in the numerator and no addition or subtraction in the denominator. So I have to think multiply by my conjugate of my denominator. Sine of x plus 1. Okay. So I get negative cosine of x, and I'm not going to distribute for now on the top until I see what my bottom comes out to be. So I have sine squared of x minus 1. So negative cosine of x times sine of x plus 1 equals cosine squared of x. So 1 cosine from here cancels with 1 cosine from here. Uh-oh. Oh, that's what happened. Sine squared of x minus 1 is not cosine squared of x. It's negative cosine squared of x. Because sine squared plus cosine squared of x equals 1. So if I move this way and this way, that's a negative cosine squared. So negative over negative is a positive. Cosine with the cosine cancels. So 1 plus sine of x over cosine of x equals 1 plus sine of x over cosine of x. And that is what you need to know for your quiz. Now, are the proofs or the identities going to be exactly the same? No, they're not going to be. One of them might be absolutely vastly different from these. Okay, you just got to understand how to keep rolling on those. Okay, so that's it for today. And then next time, Monday, we'll take a quiz and get started with cosines.